Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the ECS Defiant, watching the stars through the main viewport. His ship was on a routine patrol mission near the edge of human space when the sensors started picking up something strange. 3 massive objects were moving toward them from the direction of the Kepler 442 system. "Captain, we have incoming ships," said Lieutenant Sam Carter from the sensor station. "They're big, sir, really big." Jake walked over to look at the display. The objects were unlike anything he had ever seen. They looked like floating temples, made of crystal and light. Each one was at least 5 times the size of his ship. They moved smoothly through space without any visible engines or propulsion systems. "Have we ever seen ships like these before?" Jake asked. "No, sir," replied Carter. "The computer doesn't recognize the design. They're not from any known human colony or trading partner." Commander Lisa Hayes, Jake's second-in-command, joined them at the sensor station. She had been studying the readings for several minutes. "Captain, I'm picking up some kind of energy signature from those ships. It's unlike anything in our databases." Jake nodded. "Open the communication channel. Let's see who we're dealing with." The main screen flickered to life, but instead of showing the inside of an alien ship, it displayed a figure that made the entire bridge crew step back in shock. The being appeared to be made of pure light and energy. It was tall and elegant, with features that seemed to shift and change like flowing water. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Primitive ones," the being said in perfect English. "You will submit to the divine will of the eternal shepherds. We are the Zealothi, your rightful rulers. Prepare to be judged." Lisa looked at Jake with raised eyebrows. "Did that thing just call us primitive?" Jake stepped forward. "This is Captain Morrison of the Earth Colonial Navy. We don't know who you are, but we're not looking for trouble. We're just on patrol in our own territory." The Zealothi being seemed amused. "Your territory?" "All space belongs to the eternal shepherds. We have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. Every thinking species bows before our divine wisdom." 10,000 years? Jake said quietly to Lisa. "That's impossible. Humans have only been in space for about 200 years. The Zealothi continued speaking. "You will dock with our vessel immediately. Your ship and crew will be evaluated. If you are found worthy, you may serve us. If not, you will be eliminated." Jake felt his anger rising. He had served in the Colonial Navy for 15 years and had never backed down from a fight. "I'm sorry, but we don't take orders from strangers. You're in human space now. I suggest you move along." The Zealothy's expression changed. For the first time, it looked surprised. "You dare refuse the divine command?" "No species has ever shown such foolishness." "First time for everything," Lisa said with a smile. Suddenly, Jake felt a strange pressure in his head. It was like someone was trying to push their way into his thoughts. He looked around the bridge and saw that his crew was experiencing the same thing. Lieutenant Carter was holding his head and groaning. The navigator was staring blankly at his console, but Jake found that he could resist whatever was happening. He focused his mind and pushed back against the alien presence. "What are you doing to my crew?" The Zealothi looked confused. "You should be kneeling by now. All species kneel when we use our divine power." "Well, we're not all species," Jake said. He turned to Lisa. "Are you okay?" Lisa was shaking her head to clear it. "I'm fine." "That was weird, but I'm fine." Around the bridge, the human crew was recovering from whatever the Zealothi had tried to do to them. They looked confused and angry, but they were definitely not kneeling, the Zealothi being stepped back. "This is impossible. Our psychic compulsion works on all thinking creatures. How can you resist?" "Maybe we're just stubborn," Jake said. "Now, I'm going to ask you one more time to leave our space." The Zealothi ship's energy signature suddenly changed. "You will submit or be destroyed. This is your final warning." Jake looked at his crew. They were all at their stations, ready for whatever came next. These were good people, trained professionals who had signed up to protect human colonies and trade routes. They didn't deserve to die because some alien thought it was a god. "Battle stations," Jake ordered. "All hands prepare for combat." The bridge became a flurry of activity. Weapon systems came online, shields powered up, and the ship's engines began charging for evasive maneuvers. Jake had fought pirates and hostile aliens before, but never anything like this. The first shot came from the Zealothy ship without warning. A beam of pure energy struck the Defiant's shields, causing the entire ship to shake. The lights flickered, and alarms began sounding. "Shields down to 70%, reported the weapons officer. "They pack a punch, Captain. Return fire," Jake ordered. "Target their weapon systems." The Defiant's plasma cannons fired back, striking the crystalline hull of the Lid Zealothy ship. To everyone's surprise, the alien vessel's shields flickered, and sparks flew from several points on its surface. "We hurt them," Lisa said with satisfaction. "They're not as tough as they look." The battle continued for several minutes. The Zealothy ships were powerful and their weapons were advanced, but they seemed confused by human tactics. They fought like they expected their enemies to be afraid and to run away. When the humans kept fighting back, the aliens didn't know how to respond. Jake used every trick he had learned in his years of service. He ordered the ship into a spinning dive that confused the Zealothy targeting systems. He had his crew fire on multiple targets at once, dividing the aliens' attention. Most importantly, he never let his people give up hope. "They're retreating," Carter announced as the Zealothy ships began to pull back. "No," Jake said, watching the tactical display. "They're regrouping. They'll be back with more ships." One of the Zealothy vessels had been badly damaged and was leaking energy into space. The other two were intact, but their shields were down. As they pulled away, the lead ship sent one final message: "This is not over, humans. The Eternal Shepherds, do not forget, you will pay for this insult." Jake watched the alien ships disappear into hyperspace. He knew this was just the beginning. They had made enemies of beings who claimed to rule the galaxy. But they had also proven something important. "Captain," Lisa said, "we need to report this to Earth Command immediately." "Agreed," Jake replied. "But first, let's make sure we understand what just happened. These Zealothy things tried to use some kind of mind control on us, and it didn't work." "Why?" The ship's doctor, Nancy Brooks, had been monitoring the crew during the encounter. "I ran scans on everyone during the attack. Whatever they did, it caused unusual brain activity in most of the crew. But humans seem to have some kind of natural resistance to it." "That's good news," Jake said. "What about the ships themselves? Any ideas about their technology?" The chief engineer, Mike Turner, had been analyzing the sensor data. "Their ships are definitely advanced, but they're not magical. The energy weapons, the shields, even that weird psychic thing they do, it's old technology, very advanced technology, but still technology." Jake nodded. "That means we can learn to fight it." "Lisa, set course for Earth. We need to warn everyone about what's coming." As the Defiant jumped to hyperspace, Jake thought about the Zealothy's words. They claimed to have ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. Every species bowed to them. But humans had just proven that their power wasn't absolute. Word of the encounter would spread quickly through human space. The colonial navy would want to know everything about these self-proclaimed gods. Scientists would study the sensor data. Military strategists would plan defenses. But Jake knew that the real fight wouldn't be about weapons or technology. It would be about something much more basic. The Zealothy expected submission, they expected fear, they expected everyone to kneel. Humans had never been very good at kneeling. Dr. Richard Stone looked through his microscope at the strange metal fragments scattered across his lab table. 3 weeks had passed since Captain Morrison's encounter with the Zealothy, and Earth Command had sent every piece of debris from the battle to the New Horizon Research Station. Richard had been working 18-hour days trying to understand the alien technology. "Computer, increase magnification to level 12, he said, adjusting the focus. What he saw made him step back in surprise. The metal wasn't really metal at all. It was some kind of crystalline matrix filled with tiny circuits that moved and changed like living tissue. His assistant, Dr. Kelly Martinez, looked up from her workstation. "Find something interesting, Rick?" "More than interesting," Richard replied. "Kelly, come look at this." I think I know what these Zelithy really are. Kelly walked over and peered into the microscope. Those patterns, they look almost like neural networks. But they're artificial. Exactly, Richard said excitedly. I don't think the Zelithy are energy beings at all. I think they're consciousnesses living inside these crystalline computer systems. They've transferred their minds into machines. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, Lieutenant Colonel Amy Carter was preparing for the most dangerous mission of her career. Her team of 12 soldiers had volunteered for a reconnaissance mission into Zelithy territory. Their job was to gather intelligence about the alien empire and find out how many species they controlled. Amy checked her equipment one final time. The stealth ship Whisper was small and fast, designed to avoid detection. If everything went according to plan, they would slip into the Zarian system, gather data, and get out without being seen. Everyone ready? Amy asked her team. They were all veterans, chosen for their experience and reliability. Sergeant Tony Rodriguez nodded from the pilot's seat. Corporal Diana Walsh finished checking her reconnaissance gear. The others gave thumbs-up signals. Let's go see what we're really up against, Amy said. The journey to Zarian took 6 days. When they arrived, what they found shocked them all. The system had 5 planets, and every single one was covered with massive industrial complexes. Millions of ships moved between the planets, carrying cargo and workers. The scale was beyond anything humans had ever imagined. My God, whispered Private Frank Davis, staring at the sensor readings. How many people live here? According to these scans, about 12 billion, Tony replied. And they're not all the same species. I'm reading at least 6 different biological signatures. Amy studied the data carefully. Set us down on the 3rd planet. Those industrial complexes look like mining operations. We need to see what's happening on the ground. The Whisper landed in a rocky canyon about 50 miles from the nearest complex. Amy's team put on their camouflage gear and began the trek toward the mining facility. What they found there would change everything they thought they knew about. The Zelithy Empire. The mining complex was enormous, stretching for miles in every direction. Thousands of workers moved between the machinery, digging, and hauling materials. But these weren't human workers. Amy counted at least 4 different alien species working together. There were the Vorthak, tall reptilian creatures with scaled skin and powerful claws. The Kurvani looked almost human except for their blue skin and large eyes. The Grothin were massive, easily 8 feet tall with thick arms and legs. And there were others Amy didn't recognize. They're all slaves, Diana said quietly, watching through her binoculars. Look at their movements. They're exhausted, malnourished. And see those guard towers? Those are Zelithy overseers. Amy watched as one of the energy beings floated above. The workers, occasionally pointing at individuals who weren't working fast enough. When it did, those workers would suddenly stop and start working harder, as if they were being controlled. The psychic compulsion, Amy realized. They're using it to control the workers. For 3 days, Amy's team observed the mining operation. They saw workers collapse from exhaustion and be replaced by others. They saw the Zelithy overseers punish entire groups for the mistakes of individuals. They saw a civilization built on fear and mental domination, but on the 4th day, something unexpected happened. A group of Vorthak workers was loading ore containers when one of them stumbled and dropped his load. The Zelithy overseer immediately began moving toward the group, clearly preparing to use its psychic powers to punish them. Tony Rodriguez had been watching from a concealed position about 200 yards away. Without thinking, he raised his rifle and fired a single shot at the Zelithy. The energy beam struck the alien directly, causing it to flicker and fall to the ground. The effect on the workers was immediate. The Vorthak, who had dropped his load, looked up in amazement. The others stopped working and stared at the fallen overseer. For the first time in what might have been centuries, they had seen one of their gods hurt. "What did you do?" Amy whispered into her radio. "I couldn't just watch," Tony replied. "These people are being tortured." The Vorthak workers began talking among themselves in their own language. Their voices grew louder and more excited. Other workers from different species began gathering around. Within minutes, hundreds of alien workers were staring at the fallen Zealoty overseer. Then something incredible happened. The Vorthak, who had dropped his load, walked over to the fallen Zealoty and kicked it. The other workers gasped, but when nothing happened, they began to laugh. The sound spread through the entire mining complex. "We need to get out of here," Amy said. "This place is about to explode." But before they could move, a group of Vorthak workers began approaching their position. The humans raised their weapons, but the aliens made no aggressive moves. Instead, the lead Vorthak held up his hands in what appeared to be a peaceful gesture. "You," the Vorthak said in broken English, "you kill God thing." "How?" Amy looked at her team. They were deep in enemy territory, surrounded by potentially hostile aliens. But something about the Vorthak's tone made her lower her weapon. "We're not gods," she said simply. "Neither are they. They're just people with better technology." The Vorthak's eyes widened. "Not gods, but they control minds. They make us work until we die." "Technology," Amy repeated. "Machines, tools, they can be broken." The Vorthak leader, whose name was Thekvar, listened carefully as Amy tried to explain. Other workers gathered around, representing all the different species in the mining complex. They asked questions about humans, about Earth, about how anyone could resist the Zealothy's power. "We tried to fight," Thekvar said sadly, "many times, but when gods speak, we must obey." "How do you not obey?" Amy thought about Captain Morrison's report. The Zealothy had tried to use their psychic compulsion on his crew, but it hadn't worked. "We think different," she said. "We ask questions. We don't believe something just because someone says it's true, even if God say it, especially if God say it." Thekvar translated for the other workers. The discussion that followed was intense, with representatives from each species arguing in their own languages. Finally, Thekvar turned back to Amy. "We want to learn," he said. "Teach us to think like humans. Teach us to fight gods." Amy looked at her team. They were supposed to be on a reconnaissance mission, not starting a revolution. But the opportunity was too good to miss. "We can't stay here," she said. "But we can send others. Teachers, people who can show you what we know." "We wait," Thekvar said. "We tell others, we prepare." As Amy's team prepared to leave, she realized that something fundamental had changed. For 10,000 years, the Zealothy had maintained their empire through fear and mystique. But now, for the first time, their subjects had seen them bleed. The journey back to human space took a week. During that time, Amy composed her report. She described the mining operations, the enslaved populations, and the encounter with the workers. But most importantly, she described the look in Thekvar's eyes when he realized that the Zealothy weren't gods. "They're ready to fight," she wrote. "They just need someone to show them how." When Amy's report reached Earth Command, it caused an immediate sensation. The Zealothy Empire wasn't just a military threat. It was a prison holding billions of sentient beings. And the humans had just handed the prisoners the key. Admiral Robert Chang read the report 3 times before calling his staff together. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "we're not just fighting for humanity anymore. We're fighting for the freedom of every thinking being in this galaxy." The war against the gods had begun. General Kevin Adams stood in the war room at Earth Command, looking at the holographic display of the galaxy. Red dots marked known Zealothy positions, while blue dots showed human colonies. The red dots outnumbered the blue ones by at least 50. "To 1, sir, we have a problem," said Colonel Janet Perry, his intelligence officer. "Our scouts report that the Zealothy are mobilizing their fleets. They're moving ships toward our border systems." Kevin nodded grimly. "They're going to try to crush us before we can organize any real resistance. How long do we have?" "Maybe 6 months before they're ready to launch a full-scale invasion," Janet replied. "Their ships are slow, but they have a lot of them." Kevin studied the map carefully. A direct military confrontation with the Zealothy Empire would be suicide. Humanity had maybe 300 warships. The Zealothy had thousands, maybe tens of thousands, but Amy Carter's report had given him an idea. "We're Not going to fight them ship to ship, he said. We're going to turn their own empire against them. Janet, I want you to set up Operation Prometheus. We're going to teach every enslaved species in the galaxy how to fight back. 3 weeks later, Agent Claire Morgan landed on the abandoned world of Nexus 7. The planet had been uninhabited for centuries, but it had breathable air and plenty of space. It was perfect for what she had in mind. Claire had been a military instructor before joining Earth Intelligence. She had trained soldiers from 12 different human colonies and knew how to teach people to fight. But this job was different. She wasn't just training soldiers. She was training revolutionaries. The first volunteers arrived on stolen cargo ships. Vekvar came from Zarian, bringing 20 other Vorthak with him. A group of Corvani traders who had been secretly passing information to the Resistance arrived the next day. Even some of the massive Grokthon managed to escape from their work assignments to join the training. Welcome to Freedom School, Claire said to the assembled group. They represented 8 different species, all of whom had lived under Zealothy rule for generations. The first thing you need to understand is that you're not here to learn how to be human. You're here to learn how to be free. The training was difficult. The aliens had to unlearn thousands of years of conditioning. They had been taught that the Zealothy were gods, that resistance was impossible, that their only purpose was to serve. Breaking those mental chains was harder than learning to use weapons. The Zealothy are not gods, Claire repeated for the 100th time. They're just people who live inside machines. They can be hurt, they can be killed. Most importantly, they can be wrong. A young Corvani named Zaralyn raised her hand. But what if they use the mind control on us? What if they make us kneel again? Claire had been expecting this question. Earth's psychologists had been working on the problem since Captain Morrison's first encounter. The mind control isn't magic. It's technology. It works by targeting specific brain patterns that most species have in common. But humans are different. Our brains develop differently, so we're naturally resistant. But we're not human, said a Grokthon named Broktor. How can we resist? By thinking like humans, Claire replied. By questioning everything. By refusing to accept that anyone has the right to rule over you just because they say they do. The training continued for months. The aliens learned to use human weapons, but more importantly, they learned to think like humans. They practiced meditation techniques to resist psychic influence. They studied the technical specifications of Zealothy technology to find weaknesses. They learned to work together despite their different cultures and languages. Meanwhile, Commander Nick Peterson was setting up the communication network that would tie the resistance together. Using quantum entanglement transmitters, he could send messages instantly across the galaxy. For the first time in history, the enslaved species could talk to each other without the Zealothy listening in. The messages that came through were heartbreaking. Reports of mass executions on worlds where the Zealothy suspected rebellion. Descriptions of families torn apart as workers were shipped to different systems. Stories of entire cultures being wiped out because they showed signs of independent thought, but there were also messages of hope. A Vorthak engineer had figured out how to disable a Zealothy surveillance drone. A group of Corvani had managed to steal a shipment of weapons. 3 Grokthon had actually fought and killed a Zealothy overseer using nothing but their bare hands. The word is spreading, Nick reported to General Adams. We're getting volunteers from systems we've never even heard of. Species we didn't know existed. The Zealothy Empire is bigger than we thought, but it's also more fragile. The Zealothy were beginning to notice the changes. Production quotas were being missed across dozens of worlds. Communication arrays were being sabotaged. Most disturbing of all, their psychic compulsion was becoming less effective. More and more of their subjects were learning to resist. Inquisitor Velyan was one of the oldest and most powerful Zealothy. He had been alive when the Empire was founded 10,000 years ago. He had personally conquered dozens of worlds and enslaved hundreds of species. When the High Council assigned him to investigate the growing resistance, he was confident it would be easy to crush. His first stop was the mining world of Karelos IV, where production had dropped by 30% in the past month. The local overseers reported that the workers were becoming increasingly difficult to control. Some were even showing signs of organized resistance. Velion's crystalline ship landed at the main mining complex. As he floated above the workers, he could sense something different about them. They were still working, but their thoughts were wrong. Instead of the usual fear and submission, he detected anger, hope, and something else he couldn't identify. "You will work harder," he commanded, using his full psychic power. "You will obey without question." Most of the workers responded as expected, but about a third of them simply ignored him. They continued their tasks but showed no signs of the mental domination that had controlled them for generations. "Impossible," Velion said. He focused his power on one of the resistant workers, a Vorthak female named Cassandra. "You will kneel before your god." Cassandra looked up at him with calm eyes. "I don't kneel to anyone," she said. "I learned that from the humans." The word humans sent a chill through Velion's consciousness. He had heard reports of the new species that had somehow resisted Zealoty power, but he had assumed they were just another primitive race that could be easily conquered. "What do you know of humans?" he demanded. "I know they taught me to think for myself," Cassandra replied. "I know they showed me that you're not a god. You're just a ghost in a machine." Velion tried to probe deeper into her mind, but found only organized resistance. Someone had taught her specific techniques for blocking psychic intrusion. The humans hadn't just given her weapons, they had given her the tools to free her own mind. "Where are these humans?" he asked. Cassandra smiled. "Everywhere. They're teaching others what they taught me." "Soon, none of us will kneel to you." Velion ordered his guards to arrest Cassandra and 50 other workers. But as they were being taken away, something unprecedented happened. The other workers began to sing. It was a simple melody, but it spread through the entire mining complex. Within minutes, thousands of voices joined in, representing a dozen different species. The song wasn't in any language Velion recognized. Later, he would learn that it was a human song called "We Shall Overcome." The rebels had translated into their own languages, but the meaning was universal. As Velion's ship left Karelos 4, he composed his report to the High Council. What he had discovered there was worse than simple rebellion. The humans had done something that no species had ever done before. They had taught other beings to think like humans. "The infection is spreading," he wrote. "These humans have created a new kind of consciousness, one that cannot be controlled by traditional means. They are teaching our subjects to reject the very concept of divine authority." The High Council's response was swift and brutal. If the humans wanted to play at revolution, they would show them the true power of the Zealoty Empire. Orders went out to every fleet commander: find the human worlds and burn them all, but the humans were ready. While the Zealoty had been trying to maintain control of their crumbling empire, humanity had been building something new. Not just an alliance of species, but a new way of thinking that could spread from mind to mind like a virus. Claire Morgan received the warning through the quantum communication network. The Zealoty fleet was moving toward Earth and the human colonies. The final battle was about to begin. She looked at her graduates from the training program. They were no longer the broken slaves who had arrived at Nexus 7. They were free beings who had learned to think for themselves, and they were angry. "Time to go home," she said. "Time to teach the galaxy what freedom really means." The revolution was about to begin. The rebellion began at exactly 0800 Earth Standard Time on a Tuesday. Across 47 different worlds, resistance cells that had been training in secret for months struck at the same moment. The timing was perfect, coordinated through Nick Peterson's quantum communication network on Zarian Prime. Vekvar led a group of Vorthak workers in an assault on the main control center. They had been planning this attack for weeks, using blueprints stolen by Corvani sympathizers. The Zealoty overseers never saw it coming. "For freedom!" Vekvar shouted as his team stormed through the facility. The weapons they carried were human-made, designed specifically to disrupt Zealoty technology. When the energy beings tried to use their psychic powers, The Vorthak simply ignored them and kept fighting. On Groken Beta, the massive Grokthan workers had taken control of the orbital shipyards. Braktor, who had trained at Claire Morgan's school, led the assault personally. The sight of 8-foot-tall aliens smashing Zelathi control panels with their bare hands was both terrifying and inspiring, but the most important battle was happening. In the Kepler system, where Admiral Kate Phillips had brought the entire Earth colonial fleet, she had been waiting for this moment since the rebellion began, knowing that the Zelathi would respond with overwhelming force. "Admiral, we have incoming ships," reported Commander Billy Hayes from the sensor station. "Zelathi fleet, massive formation. I count at least 200 vessels." Kate looked at the tactical display. The Zelathi armada was enormous, dwarfing her own fleet of 60 ships, but she had advantages that the aliens didn't expect. Human ships were faster and more maneuverable. More importantly, human crews fought differently than any enemy the Zelathi had ever faced. "All ships, this is Admiral Phillips," she broadcast to her fleet. "Today we're not just fighting for humanity. We're fighting for every being in this galaxy who wants to be free. Show them what humans can do." The Battle of the Crimson Nebula began when the Zelathi opened fire from maximum range. Their energy weapons lit up space like a fireworks display, but most of the shots missed their targets. Human ships were small and fast, dancing between the massive alien vessels like fighters around bombers. Captain Eric Stone, commanding the destroyer Falcon, used tactics that had never been seen in this galaxy before. Instead of trying to match firepower with the enemy, he aimed for their weaknesses. His ship dove under a Zelathi cruiser and fired directly into its engine section. The alien ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light. "They can die," Eric reported over the communication channel. "Hit them hard, and they died just like anyone else?" The psychological impact was immediate. Across the galaxy, enslaved beings, watching the battle through hijacked communication networks, saw their gods burning in space. The mystique that had held the Empire together for 10,000 years began to crumble. Major Danny Rodriguez had volunteered for the most dangerous mission of the war. While the space battle raged above, he led a boarding party onto a Zelathi command ship. Their job was to capture the vessel's command center and prove once and for all that the aliens could be defeated. Danny's team consisted of 12 Marines, all equipped with the new EMP weapons that Dr. Richard Stone had developed. The electromagnetic pulse devices were specifically designed to disrupt the consciousness matrices that housed Zelathi minds. "Remember," Danny said as their boarding craft approached the alien ship, "they're going to try to get inside your heads. Don't listen to anything they say. Don't look directly at them if you can help it. Just focus on the mission." The Zelathi ship's interior was like nothing Danny had ever seen. The corridors were made of the same crystalline material as the hull, and they seemed to pulse with inner light. Strange symbols appeared and disappeared on the walls, and the air itself felt alive with electric energy. They met their first Zelathi guard at the main intersection. The energy being appeared suddenly, its form shifting and flickering like a flame. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Primitive creatures," it said, "you will surrender immediately. Your minds are weak. Your resistance is futile." Danny felt the familiar pressure in his head as the alien tried to use its psychic powers. But months of training with human psychologists had prepared him for this. He focused on the mission, on his team, on anything except the alien's words. "Fire," he ordered. The EMP blast struck the Zelathi directly. The effect was immediate and horrible. The energy being's form began to collapse, its perfect appearance dissolving into static and noise. For a moment, Danny could see what it really was: a withered, ancient creature trapped inside a technological shell. Then it was gone, leaving only a pile of broken crystal and metal. "They're not gods," Danny said to his team. "They're just really old and really scared." The boarding party fought their way through the ship, encountering more Zelathi along the way. Each encounter ended the same way, the supposedly divine beings falling apart when hit with electromagnetic pulses. By the time they reached the command center, Danny's team had destroyed 6 Zelathi and captured 2 others. The command center was enormous, filled with crystal spires and energy conduits. At the center sat the ship's commander, a Zealothi that seemed larger and more powerful than the others. When it saw the humans enter, it rose from its crystal throne. "You cannot be here," it said. "No primitive species has ever set foot in a Zealothi command center. This is impossible. Get used to." "Impossible," Danny replied. "It's what humans do best." The commander tried to use its full psychic power on the humans, but they were ready for it. Instead of falling to their knees, they raised their weapons and fired. The empty blast struck the alien from multiple directions, overloading its technological body completely. As the Zealothi commander fell, something unexpected happened. Every screen in the command center lit up with reports from across the galaxy, rebellion on dozens of worlds, Zealothi overseers being destroyed, enslaved populations rising up against their masters. "It's working," said Corporal Lisa Wong, monitoring the communications. "The whole empire is falling apart." Meanwhile, the space battle was turning in humanity's favor. The Zealothi had superior numbers and firepower, but they were fighting an enemy they didn't understand. Human ships worked together in ways the aliens had never seen. They covered each other, shared targeting data, and adapted their tactics in real time. Captain Janet Foster, commanding the cruiser Independence, coordinated a Wolfpack attack on a group of Zealothi battleships. 6 human destroyers attacked from different angles while her ship provided covering fire. The aliens tried to respond, but their rigid command structure couldn't adapt fast enough. "This is how we fight," Janet said as another Zealothi ship exploded. "Not as individuals serving a god, but as free people working together." The battle lasted for 6 days. By the end, the Zealothi armada was in full retreat. They had lost over half their ships, while the human fleet was still mostly intact. More importantly, they had lost something that could never be replaced: the fear that had kept their empire together on the planet Karas 5. The massive Grothan workers had taken control of the entire industrial complex. When the Zealothi overseers tried to regain control, they found that their psychic powers no longer worked. The workers had learned to think for themselves. Broktor stood on top of the main administration building, addressing thousands of newly freed workers. "The gods are dead," he said in the simple words that Claire Morgan had taught him. "We killed them. We are free." The crowd erupted in cheers that could be heard for miles. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy as enslaved beings realized that their masters were not immortal after all. In the Vorthak fleet, Admiral Kesson made a decision that would have been unthinkable just days before. Her ships had been ordered to support the Zealothi defense, but she had been listening to the human broadcasts. She had heard the reports of successful rebellions on other worlds. "All ships," she broadcast to her fleet, "we have served the Zealothi for 3,000 years. Today we choose to serve ourselves. Target the Zealothi vessels for freedom." The Vorthak fleet turned their weapons on their former masters. The psychological impact was devastating. Across the galaxy, other client species began to follow their example. Even the Ethereals, considered the most loyal of the Zealothi's servants, began to rebel. On the communication world of Nexus Prime, they sabotaged the psychic amplification networks that the Zealothi used to control distant populations. Without these networks, the aliens' mental domination became impossible to maintain. Captain Sam Brooks, leading the human assault on the Zealothi throne world, received reports from across the galaxy. The Empire was collapsing faster than anyone had imagined possible. "All units, this is Captain Brooks," he broadcast to the combined human and alien fleet approaching Zephyr. "The enemy is broken. Their subjects are free. But we're not done yet. We're going to finish this." As the Allied fleet entered orbit around the Zealothi capital world, Sam sent a message that would be remembered for generations. "People of Zephyr," he said, broadcasting on all frequencies, "your masters have ruled through fear and lies. Today we bring you the truth. You are not subjects. You are not property. You are free beings who deserve to choose your own destiny." The final battle was about to begin. The capital world of Zephyria had never been attacked in its 10,000-year history. The planet was covered with crystalline spires and energy temples that reached toward the sky like frozen lightning. At the center of the largest continent stood the Imperial Palace, a massive structure that could be seen from orbit. Captain Sam Brooks looked down at the planet from the bridge of his ship. Around him, the combined fleet of humans and freed alien species prepared for the final assault. The Vorthic Admiral Kessan commanded a squadron of reptilian warships. The Grothan General Broktor led a group of converted cargo vessels armed with human weapons. Even the peaceful Kravani had joined the fight, their trading ships now bristling with guns. "Captain," reported Lieutenant Gary Miller from the sensor. "Station, we're detecting massive energy buildups all across the planet." "They're powering up every defense system they have?" Sam nodded. The Zealothi weren't going to surrender without a fight. "Signal all ships. Begin the assault." The battle for Zephyria began with orbital bombardment. Human missiles and energy weapons struck the planet's defense platforms while alien fighters engaged Zealothi patrol craft in the upper atmosphere. But the real fight was happening on the surface. Throughout the capital city, the enslaved populations who lived and worked there began to rise up. The sight of their gods being defeated in space had broken the last chains that bound their minds. Maintenance workers sabotaged power systems. Servants turned on their masters. Even the elite guards who protected the palace began to question their loyalty. Commander Rachel Davis led the ground assault team that would capture the Imperial Palace. She had volunteered for the mission knowing it might be suicide. The palace was defended by the most powerful Zealothi in the Empire, beings who had ruled for thousands of years. "Remember what we learned?" Rachel said to her mixed team of humans and aliens as their transport ships descended toward the planet. "The Zealothi aren't gods. They're just very old people who are afraid of losing power." The landing was violent. Zealothi defense systems filled the sky with energy beams, shooting down several transport ships before they could reach the ground. But enough soldiers made it through to begin the assault. The palace was enormous, with corridors that stretched for miles and chambers large enough to hold entire armies. The architecture was designed to make visitors feel small and insignificant. Crystal walls pulsed with inner light, and the air itself seemed to whisper with the voices of ancient powers. But Rachel's team wasn't impressed by the grandeur. They had learned to see through the Zealothi's tricks. The beautiful architecture was just decoration. The whispering voices were just recordings. The beings who lived here were no different from any other dictators who had ever lived. They fought their way through the palace guards, a mixture of enslaved aliens and Zealothi energy beings. The aliens surrendered quickly once they realized they could choose freedom. The Zealothi fought desperately, using every trick they had learned in 10 millennia of rule. In the throne room at the heart of the palace, Emperor Moradek the Eternal waited for the end. He was the oldest of all the Zealothi, a being who had ruled the galaxy since before most species had discovered fire. His crystalline form towered above the great throne, pulsing with the power of 1,000 worlds. But when Rachel and her team finally broke through the throne room doors, what they found was not a god. Moradek's magnificent energy form flickered and wavered like a dying flame. His voice, which had once commanded the obedience of billions, was weak and frightened. "You cannot be here," he said, his form becoming more solid as fear overwhelmed his technological enhancement. "This is impossible. No primitive species has ever reached the eternal throne." Rachel walked forward slowly, her EMP weapon ready, but not raised. Around her, soldiers from a dozen different species stood together in defiance of their former master. "We're not primitive," she said quietly. "We never were. You just told us we were, and for a while some of us believed you." Moradek tried to use his psychic powers, reaching out with the full force of his ancient mind, but the effect was pathetic. A few of the alien soldiers felt a slight pressure in their heads, but they simply shook it off and kept standing. "You taught us something important," Rachel continued. "You taught us that power without consent is just tyranny. And tyranny always falls eventually." "I am eternal," Moradek said desperately. I have ruled for 10,000 years. I am a god. Gods don't die, Rachel replied. You do. She raised her weapon and fired. The electromagnetic pulse struck the Emperor directly, overloading the consciousness matrix that had kept him alive for millennia. His crystalline form began to crack and crumble, revealing the withered organic remains inside Morthek's death sent shockwaves through the Zealothi communication network. Across the galaxy, the remaining alien nobles felt their leader's consciousness disappear. One by one, they began to shut down as their technology failed and their subjects turned against them. On Zarian Prime, Vekvar stood in the ruins of the control center and watched the last Zealothi overseer flicker out of existence. Around him, thousands of newly freed workers celebrated their liberation. It's over, he said in amazement. They're all gone. But the humans weren't finished. As the Zealothi Empire collapsed, they immediately began working to prevent chaos. General Kevin Adams had prepared for this moment, knowing that the sudden fall of a 10,000-year-old government could lead to anarchy. All units, he broadcast to every human ship and ground team, begin humanitarian operations immediately. Help establish local governments. Protect civilians. We're not here to conquer, we're here to help people govern themselves. The response was immediate. Human medical teams began treating wounded civilians. Engineers helped repair damaged infrastructure. Diplomats worked with local leaders to establish new governments. On Groken Beta, Claire Morgan helped Brocktor organize the first free elections in Grokthan history. The massive aliens had never been allowed to choose their own leaders, but they learned quickly. This is how democracy works, Claire explained to a gathering of Grokthan elders. Everyone gets a voice, everyone gets a choice. No one person gets to decide for everyone else. The transition wasn't easy. Many species had been enslaved for so long that they had forgotten how to govern themselves. Some worlds experienced violence as different groups fought for power. But the humans worked tirelessly to help, sharing their knowledge and experience without trying to impose their own will. Admiral Kate Phillips coordinated the relief efforts from her flagship. Reports came in from across the galaxy, former slave worlds establishing new governments, alien species making contact with each other for the first time in centuries, trade routes opening between worlds that had been isolated for millennia. It's working, she told her staff. The galaxy is healing. But perhaps the most important moment came 6 months after the fall of the Empire. Representatives from 57 different species gathered on the neutral world of Haven Prime to sign the Free Worlds Charter. The document established the basic principles that would govern the new galactic community: democracy, freedom, and cooperation between equals. Vekvar, now the elected representative of his people, spoke for many when he addressed the assembly. For 10,000 years, we lived as slaves, he said. We forgot what it meant to be free. The humans didn't just defeat our masters, they reminded us who we really were. Ambassador Helen Price represented humanity at the signing ceremony. When asked why humans had chosen to help rather than conquer, her answer was simple. Because that's what free people do, she said. They help others become free too. The ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy, reaching billions of beings who were still learning what freedom meant. Children who had never known anything but slavery watched their parents choose their own leaders. Workers who had labored without hope saw their worlds rebuilding under their own control. The age of the Zealothi was over. The age of freedom had begun. Years later, historians from dozens of species would study the fall of the Empire. They would analyze the military tactics, the political strategies, and the technological innovations that made victory possible. But most of them would conclude that the real key to human success was something simpler. Dr. Richard Stone, now director of the Galactic Institute of Technology, put it best in his memoirs. The Zealothi made one fatal mistake. They believed that power came from being feared. Humans knew that real power comes from being trusted. The galaxy was vast and full of challenges. There would be other conflicts, other struggles for freedom and justice, but the precedent had been set. No one would ever again rule like a god. because everyone now knew that gods could fall, and if they forgot, there would always be humans around to remind them that every thinking being deserved to stand tall and choose their own destiny.